Howdy there, partners. Welcome back to the channel, and today we're talking about a Button Shy classic that is coming back with a standalone expansion with Circle the Wagons Second Shot. Now, before those city slickers in Sprawlopolis came along, there was Circle the Wagons that really laid the foundation for this card laying and multiple scoring conditions that has become so well known in the Opolis series. Now, Circle the Wagons Second Shot is designed by the same trio of Stephen Aramini, Danny Devine, and Paul Kluka. Now, Circle the Wagons Second Shot can be played as a standalone game combined with the original Circle the Wagons, and also has a mini expansion to allow you to play solo, and we'll touch on all three of these variants as the video goes along. To start things off, I want to talk about Circle the Wagons Second Shot as if you were just playing it as a standalone game. Maybe you're like me and you missed the first convoy going out west in Circle the Wagons, and this is going to be your first introduction to the game. Now, cards in Circle the Wagons are going to have two main elements to them, and you can see every card here is broken up into quadrants. Each quadrant is going to have two different things on it. The first is going to be the territory, which is the background of the card, and the second is going to be the item on the card. And there's 6 different territories and 6 different items. You can see a couple examples here of wagons, forts, bottles, pickaxes, and so on. And these are going to be important because the way the scoring conditions are going to kind of interact with these different elements on the card. Now, here I have the setup for the game, and it is going to be appropriately set up like a big circle. Now, at the beginning of the game, you're going to take your 18 cards, shuffle them up, and then you're going to flip over 3 of them at the center of the table. And this is going to be the 3 scoring conditions that you're going to be sharing with your opponent. You can see that every card on the flip side has a different scoring condition, so there's a lot of cool variability as you deal these out randomly that's going to kind of change the way that you want to draft these cards as you play the game. Now, actual gameplay is going to be super simple. The first player is going to select any card in the circle that they want. Let's say they want to start with this one. Now, your opponent is going to be able to draft the next card. And now, the way that drafting is going to work in this game is that you can either take the next card from the one that was just taken, or you can skip ahead and take any card that you want. Now, the downside to that is that any card that you skip over immediately goes to your opponent. And now this really creates some interesting tension where you're going to be fighting with your opponent, kind of giving them crap cards and trying to optimize the scoring that you're going after, while also not trying to feed them too many cards and helping them score in other ways. An interesting back and forth of which cards you want to take versus which cards you want to give your opponent. Now, placement rules are pretty simple. The main thing you have to follow is that every card that you place has to share at least one edge with a previous card. You can also overlay cards, covering up previously placed cards on top of one another, but you can never tuck one underneath. You can only build on top of what you already have. Play is going to continue, drafting cards back and forth, and eventually you'll get back to the place that you started, meaning that all of the cards have been drafted. You'll then look at the 3 cards in the center, score them individually, as well as scoring the largest group of each territory type. Like I said before, there are 6 different territories in the game, and you're going to score each one for the largest group that you have. And that's all there is to it, to playing a multiplayer game of Circle the Wagons. You set up those 3 scoring conditions, set up the other 15 cards around them, draft back and forth, and then score at the end of the game. Super smooth. My wife and I really love this. It plays in like 10-15 minutes, like really quickly. And if you're enjoying this video, please consider liking and subscribing to join the channel. I cover a lot of Button Shy games and do list videos and playthroughs and discussions and all sorts of good board game content. So if you're enjoying what you're seeing, please consider joining the channel. Now, I think that the scoring conditions in this are really interesting and really varied. Just to highlight one of my favorites here, the pick axis, where if you have pairs of the pickaxe icons that are one right side up and one's upside down, that you score off of that. And that's another rule for placement. You can flip cards upside down, and that's a totally valid way to place them. But normally you're not thinking too much about why you want to put certain symbols upside down or not. And I think that's a really clever way of using the simple rule set in an interesting way. Just one of those highlights, but I think that there's no real duds. I don't see one of these and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to play with this scoring condition. I really enjoy all of them. I'll also mention that I went and played the original Circle the Wagons after playing a bunch of Double Shot, and I was really pleased to see that a lot of the scoring conditions in that game are also really interesting. Now, one of my favorite scoring conditions in the original game is Small Town Charm, where both players are going to compare how many squares that they have in their city, and whoever has the least is going to score points on that difference. So it creates this really interesting dynamic where you want to give your opponent more cards because it'll make their boomtown bigger, and you're going to score for every square of difference between the two of you. Just really impressed by the kind of variety that both games have. And now this brings up the other way that you're going to be able to play Circle the Wagons Double Shot and Circle the Wagons. Like I mentioned before, you can just get Double Shot, you get 18 cards, and you could just play with just that set. But if you happen to have or pick up the original Circle the Wagons, you can mix and match them and just shuffle them and just deal 18 cards. Or you can combine the two and play what they're calling Newfangled mode. And what Newfangled mode is going to be is playing 2 rounds of Circle the Wagons. The first round is going to be set up the game like normal, shuffle the 2 decks up, deal them out, and go. And after you score that first round, the person who is behind in points is actually going to draft the new scoring conditions. And so the person who's behind can look at what cards they have in their town and kind of get an idea of what they're going to score highly. It's a really interesting way to play, and it's actually my favorite way to play the game, honestly. Now, base Circle the Wagons, when you're just playing 1 round, it's super snappy, super quick, and I think that if you want something a little more in-depth, a little more thinky, I think the Newfangled mode offers a great option. Because you are working off an existing grid of cards, and you're going to be able to think a little bit more of what you want to build over on that second round. Really interesting way to play the game, and I like it. It's a cool way to take this kind of standalone expansion, but also create an expansion for the original game and kind of marry them together very nicely. Now, for all my solo hawks out there, don't worry, there's also an option for you to play this solo, and that's using the mini expansion, the Lone Cowboy. Now, the way this is going to work is that there are going to be a set number of scenario cards, both for Double Shot as well as for the original game. And you can see here, for each of the scenario cards, there is going to be 2 scoring conditions that you're going to pull out and play with. And that's because the way that this plays solo is a little bit different than in a multiplayer game, obviously. Now, to set this up, it's going to be similar to a multiplayer game where you're going to take the scenario card and the 2 listed scoring conditions. But instead, you're going to take the remaining cards and only deal out 8 of them for the first round. Somewhat like the Newfangled mode, you're going to be playing the solo mode over 2 rounds. The first round, you're going to set up 8 cards around the Lone Cowboy, and it's going to have a prescribed way that it is going to draft cards. Now, after you draft all of the cards in the first round, you're going to take the remaining cards in the deck, deal them out in a circle, and then begin the second round against the Lone Cowboy. And the second round is interesting because you can see on each of these scenario cards, there's going to be a specific way that it is going to draft. And so you can kind of strategize against how this is going to want to draft cards and try to deny it based on its scoring condition. The Lone Cowboy also scores a little bit differently, where each scenario is going to have its own opponent scoring condition that you can kind of be mindful of and try to deny it cards where you can, while also trying to prioritize the 2 scoring conditions that you are also aiming for. And it's always tough with games where you have a lot of direct interaction and dynamic with your opponent to kind of simulate that in a solo variant. But I think that these scenario cards do a good job at trying to create a kind of interesting dynamic with the kind of simulated opponent, and I think overall it does a pretty good job. And so the Lone Cowboy is a good option. If you're primarily a solo player, I still think that it offers something different than the Opolis games, which are kind of well known for being solo. I think it's still a very different game. It doesn't feel like Sprawlopolis with a Western theme. It feels much more dynamic, and there's a little bit more tension going back and forth, which I like. I'm really glad that Button Shy is bringing back Circle the Wagons with this new standalone expansion. I think that it's often overshadowed by its younger brothers, and I think that it's a really, really solid multiplayer game, and hopefully this reprint with both the original as well as Double Shot will kind of help introduce this to folks who, like me, maybe got onto the Button Shy train a little bit later and missed out on this game when it was originally coming out. So if you're a fan of quick playing, drafting, tile laying, and kind of variable scoring conditions, I think Circle the Wagons Double Shot, as well as the original Circle the Wagons, is definitely worth checking out. If you like what you saw here, be sure to check out the campaign linked below, and I'd also like to thank Button Shy for sending a preview copy to take a look at this game. And while they do provide the copy, the thoughts and opinions are all my own. If you have any questions about what you saw in the video, be sure to let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys on the next one. See ya. And I like Circle the Wagons Second Shot so much, I'm giving it 3 boom towns. Be sure to check it out.